A college football coaching carousel, unlike any that came before it, is finally reaching its conclusion. And it leads us to wonder who did it better in this hiring cycle, the SEC or the Big Ten? Welcome in to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. Hope you had a Merry Christmas. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams, back from a little Christmas break as we get ready for these college football playoff quarterfinals. But before we talk about the quarterfinals, wanted to revisit the coaching carousel because, John, while we were away, a last big domino fell into place, and that was for Michigan, outside the SEC, of course, but a notable blue-blooded program, one that is monitored around the country and monitored maybe more closely than ever, given the circumstances around Sharon Moore's exit, the fired Michigan coach who's facing criminal charges at this point for his, shall we say, ugly exit at Michigan. Well, he's been replaced. Kyle Whittingham, the former longtime coach at Utah, is the hire. Makes me wonder, John, I don't know if Kyle Whittingham would have been interested in any of these SEC jobs, but had he been available at the time, you think he would have been a better hire for places like Auburn or Florida or Arkansas or some of the others that made hires in the SEC? Do you think he would have been better than some of the coaches who were hired at some of these SEC schools?
Yeah, and he was kind of off the radar. I think you're right. But I don't think he would have just taken any job. I think it took an elite job to attract him because he's basically his career seemingly had ended. And so he's gone through that process of thinking, I'm not a coach anymore. And now I don't think you would have gotten his attention if you're at Arkansas. Yeah, if you get a call from Arkansas, he would go, "Well, thanks, but I'll stay out in retirement rather than go through that." I do want to make one comment on you mentioned Michigan's former coach Moore is that's just a reminder that there are worse things than being on the hot seat in
Indeed.
coaching. Yeah.
Yes. And being in a jail cell is, I
Yes.
believe, worse than being on the hot seat. No doubt about it. I mean, yeah, a word on that, John. I mean, you've covered this much longer than I have, obviously. Can you remember a coaching exit as disgraceful as that one? I mean, this is an industry no stranger to shame and disgrace and face plants and all that goes with that. I mean, Bobby Petrino winding up in a neck brace and the motorcycle wreck, Hugh Freeze with his phone calls at Ole Miss on a university cell phone to escort service. I mean, and the list goes on and on and on. And there's obviously been more disgraceful scandals than just than those that I mentioned there. But as far as like an exit, not maybe some sort of scandal, but just like a coaching exit. Do you recall anything maybe as disgraceful and as shameful as what went down with Sharon Moore in Michigan? Because it was much more than just having a mistress. It was what came after the affair was revealed and the allegations, like I said, that resulted in Sharon Moore going to jail and now facing charges.
Yeah, I can't. I'm trying. I'm trying to brainstorm and think of something that was worse. I mean, to be, uh, you walk out of the coaching building and go straight to jail. I can't think of anything. Usually, disgrace is getting blown out in your last game, and the AD says, "I think we've seen enough." Maybe Lane Kiffin getting fired at the LAX airport. That it's Southern Cal. That's what we think of as disgraceful. No, that doesn't compare to this. Even Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino bounced back from that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Sharon Moore can bounce back from this.
No, I don't. I don't see that either because there's often a path back for disgraced coaches that have unparalleled success. You give it a few years to let the stink blow off them, and next thing you know, some programs giving them a chance to earn their way back. But it's not like Sharon Moore. If he would have just wanted to leave Michigan under normal circumstances. I don't think the programs around the country would have been lined up to hire him in the first place. And then you add in the way that this ended. No, I think we've probably seen the last of Sharon Moore in big time college football. And from where I say good riddance to Sharon Moore.
Well, no sympathy in your corner.
Mm, no.
No, that was pretty egregious. And, I thought of Art Browse at Baylor didn't commit any crimes,
Mm-hmm.
but his
But
program was in such disarray. That
yeah.
was that was another. He hasn't bounced back from that. Not
No, he
really.
was not really. He got hired to an assistant coaching
Yeah.
job at a Division II school this
Right.
offseason.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's not really bounced back from that scandal at Baylor. But getting back to the coaching carousel, John, as you look at it, let's start here. Let's start with the hires that were made. Inside the SEC, you had LSU getting the big fish, getting Lane Kiffin. But down ballot, the hires were more the up and coming hot shots. The American Conference was sort of like AAA, the AAA that the SEC schools were hiring from. And so you had Auburn hiring Alex Golish from South Florida. Florida hires John Summerall from Tulane. Arkansas hires Ryan Silverfield from Memphis. All of those are American Conference hires. And then Pete Golding gets bumped up from defensive coordinator to head coach after Lane Kiffin's exit at Ole Miss. And then Kentucky went the coordinator route as well, hiring Oregon's offensive coordinator, Will Stein, a Louisville native, to take over the job there at Kentucky. Compare that to the Big Ten. The Big Ten went much more of the veteran coach route as opposed to the up and coming hot shot. Look at the hires inside the Big Ten. Kyle Whittingham, as we mentioned, the longtime Utah coach now at Michigan. Matt Campbell, who's he's not an old man, but it seems like he's been coaching forever, was at Iowa State doing it very well for many years. Previously did it well at Toledo before that. Penn State took a roundabout way into hiring Matt Campbell. Many consider that a very strong hire for Penn State, hiring Campbell of Iowa State. Michigan State got Pat Fitzgerald, who was unemployed, but formerly the coach at Northwestern. Had some very good moments at Northwestern. His tenure did not end well for multiple reasons, both on and off the field. But he's got a path back, veteran coach from Northwestern, now at Michigan State. And then UCLA hired Bob Chesney, who had just gone to the playoff with James Madison. So in totality, who did it better this cycle? John, I mentioned the hires inside the SEC, Lane Kiffin, the big one, but then some of the other ones more the hotshot coach. The Big Ten, much more veteran, familiar faces on the whole. On the whole, who did it better, the SEC or the Big Ten?
Well, I think the Big Ten, when you look at it based on accomplishments, certainly the Big Ten did. UCLA is the only one that kind of reached. It went with Chesney at James Madison. So it's going for the up and comer. And that's all the SEC did. When we started this coaching carousel began way back in October. Of course, we knew Florida was going to fire its coach.
We did, yes.
That was pretty much a given.
I don't know if Scott Strickland, the AD at Florida, knew that, but we were ahead of the game there. Yeah,
I think Billy Napier knew.
I think so.
But if you go back, if somebody would have told me all these openings, I would have said, okay, well, somebody's got to get James Franklin at Penn State. I mean, you look at his resume; it's really good. He won in the SEC at Vanderbilt. That was unheard of until Diego Pavia came along at quarterback. He did it without a Heisman Trophy candidate at quarterback. I look at James Franklin and compare what he's done with all these other guys, but he wasn't. He goes to Virginia Tech instead. I think Virginia Tech, other than Lane Kiffin, I think Virginia Tech came out of this better than anybody in the SEC. And that's based on what these guys have done. You don't know how good they might be at these programs, but aren't you always a little leery when you get a guy who's had a brief run of success at a lower level? It doesn't always translate to what you might do in the SEC or the Big Ten or even the Big 12.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's take it, kind of rapid fire here and in case by case basis in the SEC. Auburn hires Alex Golish. If you're Auburn, would you rather have Alex Golish or would you rather have someone like Kyle Whittingham or Matt Campbell, whom Penn State hired?
Oh, I would rather have Cal Whittingham or Matt Campbell. I don't care how old they are.
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, let's continue on. Florida. John Sumrall was sort of the top of the creme de la creme of the group of five coaches, you could say, based on what he did at Tulane and Troy before that. So if I say to you for Florida, if you could have John Sumrall or if you could have Kyle Whittingham or Matt Campbell, what would you say there?
Again, I would go with Whittingham and Matt Campbell. I don't know. Maybe John Sumrall will be, one of the top coaches in the country in a few years. I don't know that, but based on what he's done, I don't see how you can look at that and say otherwise. I really don't think age is a big factor in this. Uh, that's what you would expect a 77-year-old sports columnist to say, of course. But I just think Whittingham has proved he can do it over a long period of time. He maintained a program. And maybe he didn't win in the end as much as Utah wanted. Maybe Matt Campbell didn't win as much as Iowa State wanted. Matt Campbell got to a certain level and he couldn't go any higher. Whittingham got to a certain level and he couldn't go any higher. But see, I look at those guys and say, well, maybe if you put them in a different situation with a program with more resources, maybe they can go higher. What the SEC schools are doing, they're taking guys and saying, well, maybe they can do it at a higher level, but they haven't had long-standing success where they've been. Alex Golish has only been there at South Florida a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference too between promoting from the Big 12 versus promoting from the American Conference. I mean, the American Conference is seen as the best of the group of fives, but it's not a Power Four. And so, I don't look much like you. I don't look at it as, Matt Campbell. Oh yeah, he is taking a step up, no doubt about it. Going from Iowa State to Penn State, the expectations will be bigger. The competition, the highest level of competition, at least, will be more difficult in the Big Ten. But, I think the step from going to the Big 12 to the Big 10 is not as great as the step from going from the American Conference to the SEC. That doesn't mean that none of these American Conference coaches can succeed in the SEC. Some of them can, probably, and probably some of them will. And some of them have worked inside the SEC previously in assistant coach or coordinator capacities. Alex Golish, formerly the OC at Tennessee. John Sumrall worked on staff at Kentucky, where he played. So, these guys have experience in the SEC, but not in the coaching ranks. And it's just a bigger jump going from the American to the SEC than it is like a Matt Campbell going from the Big 12, where he was in the Big 12 championship game just 1 year ago, to the Penn State. So I agree with you. I mean, I think that should sort of be the ideal. No two situations are ever the same. But in general, I think if you're the SEC, if I was an SEC athletic director and I had a coach opening, I'd be looking around in the ACC or the Big 12 thinking, who can I promote up from that Power 4 level, but not a Super 2 conference. We see this gap between the SEC and the Big 10 and the Big 12 and the ACC, but they're still in the Power 4 ranks. It's not as much of a jump up as it is for rolling the dice and hoping you hit from the American Conference. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do. And another thing I wonder about with SEC schools, because you're dealing with such passionate, outspoken fan bases, if when the AD is trying to make a hire, if he's thinking too much about winning the press conference, as they say, when you get a younger coach, a coach who hasn't been at it so long, and you can say, you can project an upside. You don't know, but you can project that. Whereas, say, if you get a Kyle Whittingham, if you go to Florida and says, well, he never won a championship. He's 60 something years old. And he never won a championship. We expect to win championships. So it's as though you're hiring a coach where fans can say, well, maybe he can win a championship, as opposed to looking at an older guy with a longer track record and saying, well, he never did it. Like a Matt Campbell. Did Florida ever consider Matt Campbell, do you think?
I don't know. No reporting indicated that he was significantly tied to that search. I could say that if I were Florida and I thought I could get Matt Campbell, I probably would have wanted him. And I don't mean that as a direct dig on Joan Summerall. I really admire and respect what Matt Campbell achieved at Iowa State. I mean, he's the best coach in Iowa State history. So, yeah, I mean, I would rather have him at Florida than John Summerall. Again, I really don't mean that as a massive dig at Summerall. It's just these guys' achievements, they're not the same. Matt Campbell achieved more, and so I think Penn State did it better by getting him than any of these SEC schools this side of LSU landing Lane Kiffin did in this cycle. I think if I'm LSU, I'm very happy with my hire of Lane Kiffin. I don't know if he's going to win a national championship or not, but I'm pleased with my hire. Otherwise, in the SEC, I'm sorry, but I think I'd rather have Matt Campbell.
Yeah, fans often get hung up on the championship. After all, that's why James Franklin, one of the reasons he was fired at Penn State, because he hadn't won a championship. He'd been there 11 years, hadn't won it all, been to the playoffs, and then he lost those games, lost to UCLA and Northwestern, factored into it, and it was time to go. He'd been there a while. However, when you look at a coach like Matt Campbell, where he's coaching at a tough place to win, Iowa State's a tough place to recruit to. And I don't know that it has the resources of some other teams to do in the Big 12. I don't think it does. So to do what he did, that shows me that he has championship potential. You surround him with more money, a better recruiting base. I mean, what's a recruiting base like there? You're the second best program in the state. Go back to Bill Snyder at Kansas State. Bill Snyder kind of ranks to me as one of the greatest college football coaches of all time, because he went to a school that had hardly ever won. And then he won in the Big 12 when it was a stronger league. He won. And so what he accomplished, to me, I think any program should have been happy to have hired Bill Snyder, and to say, well, I don't know if we can win a championship with that guy. Let's apply the same standards. What makes you think you can win a championship at Florida with John Summerall? What makes you think you can win a championship at Auburn with Alex Golesh? To me, you got to look at it a little. Just don't get fixated on the championship level.
So I think we're in agreement that in this hiring cycle, we think the Big Ten probably, on the whole, did it better than the SEC. It also makes me think of the roster of coaches now in these two Super 2 conferences. And so we're not going to go through every single coach at every SEC and Big Ten school, but I jotted down 8 names from each conference, and I thought, which one has the better roster of 8? Now, there can be some debate as to whether I have the 8 best coaches in each league. That's not, totally definable. I think the difference between the 7th best coach in the Big Ten versus the 10th best coach, you ask 4 different people and you might get 4 different answers as to who's number 7 and who's number 10. So we can quibble about some of this, but here's what I have jotted down is my 8 from the SEC versus 8 from the Big Ten. So here's my SEC coaches, sort of kind of in the top half of the conference. You have Kirby Smart, Kalen DeBoer, Lane Kiffin, Josh Heupel, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Elko, Clark Lee, and Eli Drinkwitz. Now, again, there can be some debate there of, why don't you have Brent Venables in the top 8? Or sure, we can. That's a debate for another time. But there's 8 names I jotted down from the SEC. Now, here's 8 that I have from the Big Ten as comparison. Ryan Day, Kurt Signetti, Dan Lanning, 3 guys who are playing in college football playoff quarterfinal games. So Day, Signetti, Lanning, Kyle Whittingham, Matt Campbell, Lincoln Riley, PJ Fleck, and Brett Bielema. Now, again, we can quibble at whether I have the right guys at 6, 7, 8, guys who are not on my list who maybe should be from the Big Ten, Kirk Ferentz, Matt Rule, Jed Fish. That's another debate for another time. But as I rattled off like those list of 8 names in each conference, as you look at it in sum, who's got the better roster of coaches? Do you think it's the SEC? Do you think it's the Big Ten? Do you think it's pretty close?
When you first posed this topic, my first reaction, well, I think the SEC. I thought SEC. I look at the 2 leagues. The SEC has more depth of talent. The Big Ten might be better at the top. We've talked about that a lot. But when I started thinking about it, I write down these names. The Big Ten has more accomplished coaches, and it's not close.
Mm.
It really isn't close. I mean, you didn't even mention some guys in the Big Ten that have had success elsewhere. Greg Schiano at Rutgers, for example, he's not had a great run in his second stint there, but he really did well his first time. He's been an NFL head coach. Didn't exactly excel at that level, but how many of these SEC coaches coached or head coach in the NFL? So when you start looking around at these guys, it really isn't close. And I wonder, Pat Fitzgerald, I thought that was kind of a under the radar hire.
Mm-hmm.
He did a really nice job at Northwestern. Did an SEC school not consider him at all?
Yeah, it's interesting because I agree with you. Like when we compare as a conference in terms of the teams between the SEC and the Big Ten, the way I've started to look at it is I think the Big Ten is as good or better. In the past couple of years, I think it's been better at the top. I think where the SEC has the advantage is sort of in the middle of the conference and even in the bottom third of the conference. I think the bottom third of the SEC is better than the Big Ten's bottom third. I think it's a different situation, though, in the roster of coaches. If you just look at the top of the SEC's roster, I think it's pretty darn good. I think it's as good or better than the Big Ten's. I mean, you look at the top of the roster, and let's call it Kirby Smart, Kalen DeBoer, Lane Kiffin, Josh Heupel, and Steve Sarkisian. That's a pretty darn good top 5 as compared to however you want to draw the line in the Big Ten. I mean, Ryan Day, Curt Cignetti, Dan Lanning have to be in their top 5. And then let's throw in Kyle Whittingham and Matt Campbell. I think 5 versus 5, those 5 names from each league, I think the SEC is as good or better in that 5-name roster. But as you start to go down 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that type of situation, I think the Big Ten flexes a little bit with a better depth of its coaching roster than the SEC. Now, a couple years from now, maybe we change that opinion. Maybe John Sumrall really is as good as advertised. Maybe Alex Golish, we come to find that he was the brains of that Tennessee operation in 2021, even though Josh Heupel has continued to win, not to that level. But point being, some of these guys in the SEC could still prove themselves. Maybe Will Stein at Kentucky, proves to be kind of an under the radar, diamond in the rough type of hire. We might look at this differently in a couple years, but right now, I think the full roster of coaches is probably better in the Big Ten than it is in the SEC. Even though at the top, I still think the SEC is pretty strong with guys like Kirby Smart and Josh Heupel and Lane Kiffin, Kalen DeBoer, and others at the top of the list. Overall, I'd take the Big Ten's list.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I look at these, and it just really makes me wonder did the SEC ADs really get focused on just looking at one type coach, as though they don't want an older coach? I'm not sure what their main criteria were, but I look at the hires that we saw. I mean, Arkansas hiring Ron Silverfield at Memphis. I mean, he's done a nice job at Memphis. But I wonder I wonder if these ADs thought outside the box at all.
Maybe they thought they were thinking outside the box by hiring, hot shot coaches from the American. That has not been like the hiring model for the SEC the last 15 years. That's not the tried and true route of find the 40-something-year-old coach from the American Conference and give him the job. So maybe they thought this was like revolutionary, but then they all ended up sort of copying off of each other and hiring 40-something-year-old offensive-minded American Conference coaches. Well, I guess John Summerall's more on the defensive side of the ball. But point being, guys in their 40s from the American. I mean, you saw Auburn, Florida, Ryan Silverfield. They're all with Ryan Silverfield at Arkansas. They're all making this move. 40-something-year-old guys from the American Conference, whereas the Big Ten, maybe that's more the revolutionary thought of hire someone in their 60s, like Kyle Whittingham. But and that age came up a lot with that hire. But I thought, John, I know, as you say, you're a 77-year-old sports columnist, so you have no problem with hiring a 66-year-old coach. But I look at it as like the lifespan of a coaching tenure at this point. What, maybe about 5 years? You get five good years out of a guy, you got to be happy. And so Kyle Whittingham being 66 is very different than Kyle Whittingham being 86. I mean, I think you can get 5 good years out of a guy. If he's still got the fire to do it, that's a question. To me, it's not about age. If he's still got something to prove and wants to show Utah maybe what they're missing or show what he can do with Michigan's resources, you get 4 or 5 good years out of Kyle Whittingham, that's fine. I'm not thinking 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years down the road when I'm making a coaching hire anymore. I'm thinking, can this guy give me 5 good years? If so, I don't care how old he is. Just give me 5 good years, and that's fine. And you look at it in this playoff. I mean, Curt Cignetti's 64, and there's a lot of programs that would trade their coach right now for Curt Cignetti. Indiana's not going to let them have him. So I agree with you on the age factor there. But the SEC didn't follow that route. They hired a lot of younger guys, and maybe that works too. Kirby Smart was a younger guy when Georgia hired him.
Well, you look at these guys and you look at the teams, the schools doing the hiring. What's Arkansas's recent track record of hiring coaches?
Not great.
No. What's Auburn's recent track record of hiring coaches?
Pitiful.
What's Florida's recent track record?
Not great.
Ole Miss got Lane Kiffin. That was a big hire.
Mm-hmm.
Before that,
Matt Luke.
That wasn't hitting the jackpot. LSU. I mean, it kind of repeated itself. It hired the big name coach who had success with and gave him a lot of money to come there to win a championship. And then a few years later, it fired him. Brian Kelly didn't win enough. But it's done the same thing, the same kind of coach in a way, not style certainly, but track record. And it's brought in Lane Kiffin with the idea, okay, well, he'll win a championship here. Couldn't quite do it at Ole Miss, just like Brian Kelly couldn't win a championship at Notre Dame, but he got the playoffs, so that translates to a championship at LSU. So we look at these schools that are doing the hiring, I think they're not knocking it out of the park on these hires. That's their recent history.
I would agree. There's a situation, John, as we broaden this from the coaching hires to the college football playoff. The SEC is guaranteed of at least one semifinalist, with Georgia and Ole Miss meeting in the Sugar Bowl. The SEC is going to have a minimum of one team in the semifinals, a maximum of 2. They get 2 if Alabama beats Indiana and gives the SEC a second semifinalist. But the Big Ten, they could have 3 of the 4 semifinalists. If Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon win, that's 75% of the semifinals going to the Big Ten. Oh boy, can you imagine the amount of noise that's going to be coming down from the north if the Big Ten? Very real possibility, by the way. I know both of you and I like Texas Tech, but not unthinkable at all that the Big Ten could snag 3 of the 4 spots in semifinals. What a bunch of noise that's going to be.
Well, there's still going to be noise, even if it doesn't get 3 out of 4. If another Big Ten team wins a national championship, and then you've got 3 in succession with Michigan, Ohio State, maybe Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon now. Yeah. And the SEC can brag about its depth of talent, but the Big Ten's holding that trophy up every year. So I don't think it cares about the SEC's depth of talent. A lot of Big Ten fans are getting a big laugh out of this.
We debate the playoff format a lot, John, and what should be or what can be, what's wrong, all this type of stuff. If I'm the Big Ten, I don't know that I want to change this playoff format at all, particularly if I'm in the top 1/3 of the Big Ten. This 12-team playoff, this 5+7 format, as far as the bids, I think it works as well or better for the Big Ten as it does for anybody. And we're seeing that even in this playoff, where I say, the Big Ten could have as many as 3 teams in the semifinals. As you've mentioned, they've won back-to-back national championships. Now, Michigan was not in the 12-team playoff, and they cheated to win their national championship. But hey,
minor technicality. He's still holding up the trophy. Nobody's taking it back. It's not Reggie Bush's Heisman.
He's say cheating, now, I say college football. Yeah. Chance to go 3 in a row here for the Big Ten. And I think this playoff format works for the Big Ten. The Big Ten's funneling out all these blue sky ideas for 24, 28. I don't know. I mean, by the time we get to the end of this thing, they might have 96 teams in the playoff. They're floating around out there. But if I'm the Big Ten, especially if I'm at Ohio State or Oregon or now Indiana or Michigan, I mean, I think if you're Michigan, you think you're on the way back. That's what you have to believe anyway. I don't know that I want this playoff format to change if I'm the Big Ten, or certainly if I'm one of those schools in the Big Ten. I think the SEC probably wants it to go to 16 or needs it to go to 16 more than the Big Ten does. I think it benefits the SEC more than the Big Ten. Big Ten, maybe they ought to just keep pumping out these harebrained ideas, these never going to happen playoff ideas, as sort of a stall tactic, and just try to keep the 12-teamer in place.
Yeah, it's a red herring. It's actually playing chess to the SEC's checkers and fooling the SEC into believing what its actual goal is here. The goal is to win more championships, and it's doing a good job of that. Maybe the SEC changes all that this year, but when you look at it, I've thought all year the Ohio State and Indiana were the 2 best teams in the country. Neither team has a glaring weakness. And I look at SEC teams, I'm more skeptical. I see holes in their games. I see, maybe on their best day, if everything falls into place, they could win one of these championship caliber games. But we look at every aspect of these teams, and they're not as complete a team as Ohio State and Indiana are.
Speaking of Indiana, John, I look at this Alabama game against Indiana as a real risk-reward scenario for Kalen DeBoer. Maybe you could say that about any football game and any coach, but I really think for Kalen DeBoer here in year 2, this is an important moment. Indiana, undefeated teams, got the number 1 next to its name. I think informed college football fans, many of which Alabama fans are. They're passionate fans. They're informed fans. I think Alabama fans at their core know that this is not the Indiana of old. And yet still, Alabama fans can know that, but they expect to beat Indiana. That's the history of the programs, and they can know that the game has changed, but you still, if you're an Alabama fan, you feel a little uncomfortable losing to a school with Indiana on the jersey. And more to the point, you would be bookending your season with losses. And I think that's the risk for Kalen DeBoer if they were to lose, particularly if they were to lose badly to Indiana here, is that the season will be, his year 2 will be remembered as much or more for what happened at the bookends, starting and ending with losses, starting with Florida State loss and ending with an Indiana loss, as it will be remembered for maybe some of the achievements that happened in the middle. Now, the potential for reward is obvious. Like in yesteryear, before the 12-team playoff, this Alabama team, we wouldn't be talking about it in the playoff. We'd be talking about this Alabama team in a Citrus Bowl. But this is the type of team that now the 12-team playoff can lift up. And Alabama, to its credit, beat Oklahoma in round 1, and now here's the opportunity in the quarterfinals. And if Alabama can beat Indiana, well, Alabama can be playing on the final day of the season. If you're good enough to beat Indiana, you're good enough to be playing on the final day. So how do you look at this for Kalen DeBoer? Because like I said, that's maybe the simplistic way that I see it is as much as any coach in this bracket, I see a real risk reward scenario here for Kalen DeBoer and Alabama stepping out there against number 1 Indiana.
Yeah, I think the risk is probably greater than the reward. I think so many SEC fans, Alabama in particular, because Alabama has has had two dynasties, one under Bear Bryant, one under Nick Saban. It has an image. It's the very top of college football. Indiana is a basketball school. I think Alabama fans look at Indiana and see it in the playoff and think Kentucky, a basketball school in the SEC. What are the chances they think of Kentucky making the college football playoff, Kentucky beating Alabama? They just can't. They can't even imagine that. Even though, I mean, Kentucky hasn't had that kind of success, but Indiana, that's who Indiana was for a long, long time. And now you got to throw out all that history, because this is a really, really good team. It's an Ohio State type team with a different name on its jerseys. But I just don't think fans look at it that way. They can't shake that image. So if you lose, they're say, well, here's this basketball school that just beat us and is going to the college football playoffs. All we had to do is beat this basketball school. All we had to do is beat Kentucky, and we're going to the semifinals. I just think, and if he wins, some Alabama fans will say, well, Indiana was overrated. They weren't really that good. Yeah.
And the other quarterfinal involving SEC teams, John, is a rematch of one we saw earlier this season, albeit Ole Miss's coach changed, and that's Ole Miss against Georgia. I'm wondering how to frame this for Ole Miss. Like, is this a nothing to lose, free swing scenario? Because you've already lost your coach, you're the underdog. It's a team you've already lost to against Georgia, or is that maybe the wrong way of losing him? Because they had a great chance to beat Georgia in the regular season, and in fact, they kind of blew it. They were winning that game for a while, and they just could not get a defensive stop, and it was like the Ole Miss offense had to score every time they touched the ball, and eventually didn't score every time they touched the ball. But I mean, they were right there. They could have won, and in some people's minds, maybe should have won that game. And Georgia, I think, has gotten better since then. But Ole Miss, no matter who's on the sideline, whether it be Lane Kiffin or in the first round with Pete Golding, Ole Miss has been looking pretty stout for a while now. Now it's better on offense significantly than it is on defense, but I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't look at it as underdog, nothing to lose scenario, and look at this as two of the SEC's best going at it, and don't see yourself as the underdog if you're Ole Miss in this game, because you were so close the last time. See yourself as we're just as good as Georgia. Just got to get a couple stops. How do you frame this one?
Well, kind of like you did initially. I think it's Ole Miss has nothing to lose here. It's all the intangibles favor the Rebels by an overwhelming majority. For one thing, it has the confidence of having played Georgia even Steven, and as you said, could have won the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as though they're going into this game thinking, oh, mighty Georgia. You scored 35 or so points on Georgia. Your offense worked against their defense. They're supposed to be this defensive juggernaut, and you put up 35 or so points on them. So you should have confidence. And then it's the motivation of, we want to show Lane Kiffin that we were better than he thought we were. As you pointed out in your column, Lane Kiffin went to LSU because he thought he had a better chance of winning a national championship. This is Ole Miss's chance to prove him wrong. And so I think that's tremendous incentive. Ole Miss is a team that's never played in the SEC championship game. This is really, truly high cotton for Ole Miss. So it's already won. The fans are now in love with Pete Golding because he's the non-Kiffin. He doesn't do yoga. He doesn't talk a big game, and he doesn't leave them. He stayed with them. Not that he had a real choice there. He wasn't going to be a head coach anywhere else right away, I don't think. But yeah, I just think all of that works to Ole Miss's advantage. I see Ole Miss going into this game with a lot of confidence and with a lot of motivation.
Yeah, as you referenced, John, I wrote in a column this week that this would be the ultimate revenge, the ultimate payback for Ole Miss if they could beat Georgia and keep advancing in this playoff. Because although Lane Kiffin did not say this, I truly believe that Lane Kiffin leaving Ole Miss signaled that he did not believe this team could win a national championship. I think if Lane Kiffin believed Ole Miss could win a national championship, he would still be Ole Miss's coach. He would have taken the raise. He would have signed the extension. He'd be coaching the Rebels because even renegades like Kiffin, they don't leave national championship teams. They leave teams. Kiffin left a team that I think privately he thought, yeah, this is a playoff team, but it's not a national championship team. And I don't know that I'll ever have a national championship team in Ole Miss. And maybe he's right, by the way. Maybe he's not wrong in that opinion that this is not a national championship team, that he maybe couldn't have won a national championship at Ole Miss, or at the very least that there's more advantages that help toward winning a championship at LSU. I'm not saying his opinion is wrong, but I do think the way to get payback then is to show him that he was wrong. I don't know that he is, but if you prove that he was wrong in that opinion, oh, Lane's going to be all up in his feels. Then he's going to be thinking, maybe I screwed this up. Maybe I looked at this wrong. He'll be tweeting something else. He'll be tweeting a congratulations to Ole Miss and then a photo from a hot yoga studio. But never mind what he's tweeting on the inside. I think Lane's going to be second guessing himself if Ole Miss can score some payback and beat Georgia. If this goes how many people think it goes and Georgia wins, then Lane Kiffin thinks privately, I was right all along. This wasn't a national championship team, and well, win-win at LSU.
Well, it's if he really looked hard at Ole Miss, so I wonder if he ever had this thought. He didn't think this team was good enough to win a national championship. Playoff team, but not a championship team. Did he think last year's team was a national championship caliber team? It was closer when you looked at the depth of talent on its roster, when you looked at its defense, had a big-time quarterback who's starting as a rookie in the NFL, didn't have the running back he does now. But overall, that was a more formidable roster. So he built that team at Ole Miss. And he didn't win a championship, and he didn't even make the playoffs. So he may be second-guessing himself a lot in his time at LSU.
Interesting. John, these other two quarterfinals here, and I talked about this last week with Matt Hayes as he pinch hit for you on the pod last week. These other two quarterfinals of Ohio State, Miami, and then Texas Tech, Oregon. I think they're both pretty good matchups there. But which one interests you more? I mean, this is a situation where Miami, it's like the comeback of the U, and then I think there's some intrigue, at least from where I sit with Texas Tech, because it's like all you need, as if it's some small thing, all you need is one billionaire to funnel some tens of millions of dollars into your roster, and poof, you're in the college football playoff, which whether you think that's right or wrong, that's reality now. And I think that's sort of an intriguing narrative around Texas Tech here is how one oil tycoon could potentially get you into the semifinals. So what do you think about those two? Is one kind of grab your attention a little bit more than the other in Ohio State, Miami, and Texas Tech, Oregon?
Oh, much more so. Oregon and Texas Tech. I think both those programs are here to stay, and both of them are very well funded. And I don't say that as a knock. I love it when people refer to Texas Tech or Oregon with Nike support, Texas Tech with oil tycoon support, and look at those. Well, they bought their roster. Everybody's buying their roster.
Yeah,
this is how you play the game.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as though it's some outlier. This is the way you win. And I'm really curious because I don't think either one of those teams, I think those teams, those programs can be playoff regulars. I think Texas Tech is really good, maybe better than what most people think they are. I like Oregon's quarterback better, and that matters a lot in these kind of games. But boy, Texas Tech, it wasn't just built through the portal and through NIL funding. It was built kind of the SEC's old-fashioned way in the lines, in the trenches, as they say. That front four, really the front seven with those playmaking linebackers, not just one of them. Boy, that's a tough defense to go against. So I'm really interested in how that game will go.
Do you like, John? Do you like the fact that a quarterfinal is on New Year's Eve, and then you have the other 3 quarterfinals on New Year's Day? Because it's so much different than it used to be. Whereas New Year's Day was the big day for all these bowl games, kind of in the interim to the bigger games to come. But of course, college football's postseason looks totally different now, and so now we don't have so much of the New Year's Day focus on games like the Citrus Bowl or the Outback Bowl or stuff like that. New Year's Eve / New Year's Day has now become like sort of the big day in the college football playoff calendar, and there's 2 rounds after this. But in terms of you get 4 games in like a 24-hour window. You like that setup, or do you kind of miss the old days of when you had so much focus on the bowl games on January 1?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think ideally I would like to see 4 games, the 4 playoff games on the same day,
Mm-hmm.
but start it in the morning. I'd have to set my alarm clock for 9:15, and you kick off at 9:30.
Where are they going to play that game?
Well, you need to play
somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean,
Eastern time. So, well, I guess you could play it in London. So you can kind of go from, you get about 15 hours of college football that way.
Could we compromise maybe on 11 Eastern time, John? I don't know about.
Well, yeah, really, with my schedule, yeah, that would be fine with me. If they kicked off the last game at 11 p.m., I would like that very much.
Kick the first one off at 11 a.m. Eastern. Kick the last one off at 11 p.m. Eastern.
There you go.
Yeah, and have 4 games.
That's the way to go. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got it solved. Have a good New Year, John. To all of our listeners, Happy New Year. Hope we get some good quarterfinals. I think we will. John and I will be back to discuss next week. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.